Good afternoon, folks. Welcome back to the Other Israel Film Festival and a very special presentation of the conversation for Ma'abarot. And this is being done in collaboration with NIF's New Israel Fund's Film Club. And you'll hear more about that in a moment. I just want to tell you what else is coming up for us today. And this is the last 3 days of Other Israel. So this is your last chance to watch all these wonderful films and to tell your friends to watch all these wonderful films. Coming up later today at 5 p.m., we have the film Objector and Image of Victory, which will also be in partnership with New Israel Fund's New Gen and JCC Manhattan's 20s and 30s. As well as Encounter. So please join for that conversation and check out those films. Objector and the short film Image of Victory will both be discussed there. Then tomorrow we have the film One More Jump about parkour athletes in Gaza. And finally, closing night, we have Lila in Haifa, and that's going to be followed by a special after-party celebration of Chag HaChagim, which is a multi-religious celebration that goes on every year in Haifa. We're excited to present a celebration of that here. So please join us. And now it gives me great pleasure to hand things over to really our lead partner on this festival, who has been one of the founding partners in all of this and is really picking up all the slack while we're not running this festival, and that is the New Israel Fund. Libby has been, specifically, Libby Lenkinsky has been an amazing partner, helped us select these films. You could blame her for all the bad ones. I'm just kidding. And I'm going to hand things over to Libby. Libby, over to you.
Thank you so much, Itzi, and thanks for the kind words. It's an honor to be here, and it's always an honor to partner with Other Israel Film Festival, where we feel so at home because so many of the issues that we work on the ground and that we have supported for the last 4 decades come to life on the silver screen because of the amazing work of Israeli and Palestinian filmmakers who come through every year. This year come through Zoom, usually come through in person in Manhattan with their amazing creations, and the very fine curatorial eye of the staff and of Carol Zabar, our beloved board member and co-founder of Other Israel Film Festival. So it's really an honor to be here. Many of you I can see are film club people. For those who aren't, I'll just say one quick word, which is that when COVID started and we realized that we were going to be at home for some period of time, we didn't really know how long. So Yitzi and I were talking and felt like this is a chance for people to catch up on films and television from Israel that maybe they haven't seen in a long time. And we have access to a bunch of creators, filmmakers, producers, directors, actors, et cetera, who could join us for some conversations. And we said, we'll do it for a few weeks while people are at home. And as I was telling Arik and Dina earlier, this is our 25th film club. And it's very perfect that we're celebrating that in partnership with Other Israel again here at the festival. So if you're interested in more information about joining Film Club, we are going to keep doing it so long as we're at home and see what happens once we get back out. And so feel free to look for it and sign up to join us for films every 2 weeks. And it's really, really an honor to be talking with Dina and with Arik today about the film Ma'abarot, which is so important and so close to so many of the social justice issues that we're all working on in Israel. The way that we're going to do this conversation is just a little bit different than the traditional Q&A. We're going to do it in our film club style. So I'm going to finish welcoming everybody now, and then I'm going to introduce Arik and Dina, ask them one question. Then we're going to go into breakout rooms and have a chance to talk with each other for about 7 or 8 minutes. To try to bring out your own reactions in a smaller group. There'll be a facilitator in each breakout room. And when we come back into the big room, those facilitators will share the questions that were raised in the group, not a full report back, but just giving me one bit that I can bring into the conversation with Arik and Dina, so we get to hear as much as we can from people who are here in this Zoom room. So with that, I'm just going to remind us about Ma'abarot and about who Arik and Dina are. So the film that we watched, Ma'abarot, the Israeli transit camps of the 1950s were a controversial enterprise, housing hundreds of thousands of new immigrants from different parts of the world, transitioning them into becoming part of the Israeli cultural tapestry. This film unravels multiple stories of the camp's residents, examining and discovering many surprising new details while shattering stereotypes prevalent in the current Israeli consciousness. Dina Zvi RIklis, the director of Ma'abarot, graduated from the Department of Theater at Tel Aviv University. She's made multiple films, including Ma'abarot, The Fifth Heaven, Three Mothers, The Witch from Melchett Street, Levana, My Darling, and many more. Welcome, Dina. Arik Bernstein, the producer of Ma'abarot, has been a leading force in the Israeli film industry for the past 20 years. His films and programs have been screened on major film and TV festivals worldwide and have been awarded numerous Israeli and international prizes. So welcome, Arik. It's great to be here with you as well. And so I'm just going to start, as I always do on Film Club, and just ask you both, why did you decide to tell this story? What drew you into telling this story and making this film? And so, Dina, let's start with you, and then Arik will get your answer as well.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. When Arik called me and asked me to join the journey to do Ma'abarot, I was very confused. I came from Iraq as a baby with my parents and my two brothers, and we lived in Ma'aberet Atlit for 3 years. My mother came from a very rich family in Baghdad, and she never get used to the new country and the new class. All her life, by the way, all her life, she regrets coming to Israel. And in her words, pity the pilot didn't lose the way to Israel and didn't land in another country. It was not a joke. My parents and me didn't talk about the period that we spent in the Ma'abara, and I was not sure that it was the right thing for me to do to deal with this subject. But eventually, working on Ma'abarot was kind of closure and healing for my biography. This is in the personal level. We were a team of 4 people. In 4 people, 4 years, we spent, searching this period, and we all came from different background. We had lots of arguments. This is gossip. But finally, we could say that the film is a melting pot for the creators, but not for the country. I think that I represent the second generation. And, in history, every society of immigrations, the first generation is silent, the second is silent, but the third generation is, looking for the roots. The people of the third generation miss the culture, the language, so we can understand the rage of the second and the third generation, that they want to fix the disrespect of their parents and their grandparents, and to bring back the honor and heal their pains. The Mizrahi or Middle East trauma is actually the DNA of the Israel society nowadays. And, I'm very proud of this project, and for me, it's very important personally and nationally. So this combination, I think, is the strength of this film.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay.
No, please continue. I thought you were done.
No, it's okay. Arik, your turn.
I just wanted to say, Dina, that I think what you described with the third generation is really interesting. I know it's true in your own family because I know your children, but I also know that it's true broadly. Yeah. And I once heard a Moroccan singer about my age named Nenta El Kayam, who has also a movie about her, talking about that. She said, my grandmother was a singer in Arabic in Morocco. Then we immigrated to Israel. My parents didn't speak Arabic at home on purpose. They needed to speak in Hebrew. It was not allowed. It was not acceptable. And I am going to now sing the songs of my grandmother in Arabic on every stage for exactly, I think, the reason that you're...
And you know, Libby, that Tammy, my daughter, is more radical than me, right? You know,
I know her. It's why we're such good friends.
Yeah.
Arik, how about you? How did you get involved in this project, and why did you see fit?
Well, as Dina said, I come from a different background. I mean, my parents immigrated to Israel in 1947, but they came from Chicago, not from Baghdad, with 2 children. So I grew up speaking English at home. I heard about the Ma'abarot secondhand because my sister is I would say, pretty well-known sociologist in Israel, and she was probably the first academic who wrote about the Ma'abarot in the 70s. And I was approached with the subject by one of our team, who we were hoping that she would be here with us, Hila Shalem Ba'arat, who is now Dr. Hila Shalem Ba'arat, and her PhD is about the Ma'abarot. And I had another project which we showed home movies, and one day she told me, you know, why don't we make a film or a series about the Ma'abarot? And my first reaction was actually, I'm sure there's so many films that already have been done about the Ma'abarot, it's a waste of time. And then when I looked into it, and I saw, to my amazement, that nothing has been done about the Ma'abarot. The only thing that has been done in Ma'abarot on Israeli cinema and TV is Dina's short film, which she did in early 90s.
84.
84, and maybe 10 or 15 minutes in one of the big TV historic films. So nobody did anything about it. So this is, it was very exciting. And since this is what I do, most of my work is historic documentary series. That's what I do. So it was actually, it came to me from many directions. And Dina and I know each other for, we won't say how many years because it's embarrassing. And it took 4 years. We started another channel, and then we moved, and it was well, I'm sure we'll talk about it during the discussion, but it was a long journey in 2 ways. The first one was how do we tell the story, and what story do we tell, or what stories do we tell, and how do we bring things in context. And it's always very difficult to understand the context of what's going on, but on the other side, not lose your ability to criticize and judge and make your analysis of what's going on. This is a kind of a dichotomy that we spent days and nights and weeks and months discussing. How do we find the right equilibrium for that? And I hope we managed to do it. So as Dina said, it was a pretty amazing journey. I mean, absolutely.
I have so many questions, and I'm so excited to talk to you both about this. I think what you said, I mean, it sits so perfectly into the moment that we're in here too, of historical reckoning, and really asking ourselves the questions of like, what stories are being told in the public sphere and what stories aren't, and who's telling them and why, and how did that happen? And so with that, if Itamar gives me the thumbs up, Itamar, that's Itamar Vigoder. He's generally my Zoom co-pilot in all things Zoom at NIF. And today he is also a Zoom co-pilot at Other Israel Film Festival. And so now Itamar is going to send you into breakout rooms for about 8 or so minutes to talk about your own reactions to the film. And then I'm going to use those as my basis for the Q&A with Arik and Dina in about 10 minutes when we come back here. So enjoy your smaller group conversations, and we'll see you back here in just a few minutes. Yeah, we're still missing like a pretty good number of the groups. So I'm gonna give it another minute as people find their way back into this big room. And then just to remind everybody, I'm just gonna call on the facilitators to ask a question from your group, and we're gonna use that to guide our conversation.
Thank you so much.
Great, that was somebody coming back. Yes, and now I think we're all back. So I'm gonna ask facilitators to keep it brief because we want to get into the conversation as quickly as we can. And with that, I am going to call on Hannah Barg in Chicago, since we mentioned Chicago earlier in the conversation. Hannah?
Oh, great. So many good questions, but I guess I'll start with this sort of broader historical question of why is this chapter of Israeli history not very well told? Why is it still being hidden, or has there been any change recently?
Thank you. Now I'm going to go to Jacob Lefkowitz in New York, and you should know that if you saw the NIF Action Guide on the Other Israel Film Festival website, that was Jacob's hard work and a really wonderful way to connect films to the work that's happening on the ground. So Jacob, what about a question from your group?
Thanks, Libby. I just want to note one thing, which is in our group, I think there was a real sense of shock across levels of familiarity with this story and this history at what actually happened, which I think is what makes the film so powerful. But our question is, what actually is the legacy of the Ma'abarot today? And like, how does it show up in contemporary Israeli society in terms of the legacy of discrimination, voting patterns of the Mizrahi community, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you, Jacob. Now I'm going to go to my Zoom co-pilot, our program director, Itamar, for your group. Itamar?
Thank you, Libby. So I think our discussion mainly was around racism, and the question if how much of the racism was institutional and how much kind of came from, the ground, so to speak. And did you see, and was it on purpose, that the destruction of Ma'abarot, let's say in Kfar Saba, kind of resembled some of the destructions in the West Bank that we see today of Palestinian homes? If that's a connection that you made on purpose, or is that our own interpretation? Thank you.
Thank you, Itamar. I'm going to go to our very beloved board member and film club regular, Janine Freer, based in Baltimore, I think today, although it could be somewhere else today. Janine?
Today's Baltimore. Thanks, Libby. Well, Jacob's group basically took our question, which was the consequences and repercussions of the Ma'abarot today. So I'm going to pose a slightly different one, which is how were decisions made about the housing that was given out when people were finally allowed to leave? Clearly, there was a large amount of discrimination. So what was the mechanism for that?
Thank you. I am now going to go to Alex, based in Boston. Alex?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. So our group had some really amazing conversation, and a lot of our questions have been asked, but another one that we do have, were there any follow-up studies that we know of that have been done on the long-term health consequences for the children that were treated for ringworm with radiation?
Thank you. I'm going to now go to Mike, who's also based in New York with me. Mike? Uh-oh.
Thanks. Okay. Hi, everyone. So again, our group also had a lot of questions, but a lot of people had a question about context. This obviously came on the heels of the show and the War of Independence, and they're wondering, how did you balance explaining the context of the times with, the personal stories of the people who are in the camps?
Thank you. And last, but certainly not least, I'm going to go to Yara from Other Israel, the Associate Director of Other Israel Film Festival. Yara?
Thank you so much, Libby. We also had a lot of questions and a lot of things that came up during our conversation. But the two things that I think weren't asked yet was, what was the reaction of both the Mizrahi and the Ashkenazi community in Israel to the film? And also, where did you get all of this footage from? And how and why did they choose to photograph all of this back then?
Okay, thank you so much. And as I typically do, I'm going to kind of like group some of these and sort of get us into a conversation. And I think the place that I want to start is actually where we just ended. So I want to ask you about the footage. How did you, like, sort of the filmmaking process here? And I want to combine that with how did you balance the context, showing the historical context with the personal stories. So that sort of process question to start, and then we'll get into some of the questions about long-term impact and consequences and things like that. So, but yeah, let's start with the footage and the balancing of historical context. And either one of you can start.
Well, I'll leave the for Dina. I'm
the archive. Yeah.
Usually between us, I'm on the defense side. So I'll talk about the context. I think it's very important.
Okay, I'll talk about the archive.
And Dina will talk about context. It's tricky. As I said in the introduction before, that balancing the context with the criticism is always tricky, and especially this time. 1948, 15th of May, more or less, there's a state of Israel. There's a war going on, a very, very, very fierce war, a very expensive war. This is a country that has 650,000 Jews, used to have around 1 million Arabs. After the war, there are around 350,000 Arab Palestinians left. No money, the country is basically bankrupt. And in a matter of 2 years, something like 750,000 Jews come in. The first immigrants that come in come from the DP camps from Germany and Poland, mostly Romanian, Polish, Hungarian, then the Yemenite, then the big Iraqi immigration in 1951. So this is the context of when the Ma'abarot started. So we always, I think it's important to understand that this is a pretty crazy period. And to think of, it's not what could have been done, but for me, and I think also for the film and for Dina, it's how things were done. Because nobody expected things to be better. We also have to remind ourselves that a lot of the people that came in from the Islam countries, from the Mediterranean countries, not so much the Yemenite, but definitely from the Iraqi, as you heard from Dina, came from rich or very well-off families. The people who came from Europe came from mostly from the war, from concentration camps or DP camps or running away somewhere, and they came with nothing. So it's this very distinct Ashkenazi here, Mizrahi here. I think it's more a matter of the last 20 years than it was 70, 80 years ago.
Thank you. Dina, do you want to talk about the archives?
Okay. No, I'm going to talk a little bit about the context and then the archive. For many people, it was surprised that to find out that there were Ashkenazis in the Ma'abarot. Yeah, in a way, for those people that came from the Holocaust, the Ma'abarot was a picnic in a way, right? And they left early because they had a connection with the establishment and they spoke the same language. So the majority of the people that stay in Ma'abarot was from the Arab countries. And this is the big, pain that the people still wearing, because they stay many, many years, and they felt neglected in a way. For the archive, me and Arik thought that we won't find any footage for this period, but in a way, Ma'abarot was very photogenic. So photographers from all the world came to see this, the tents and the exotic people, the children, the hungry children. Poverty is very, very, it's photogenic. So it was for us a miracle to find really a rare footage. And it cost a lot of money, of course, but it was really, it was amazing footage, and we use it. I was so happy to discover it, and and we have, of course, the people that we interviewed. And we treat them with a big respect, and we appreciate their willing to open their heart, and we didn't want them to be victim, by the way, but to say their story. So I think this is the main important thing, that we were really took care of these people that told their stories.
So I'd like, Dina, two important things. We have to remember that almost all of our interviewees were either children or teenagers.
Yes.
Because obviously people who were then in their 20s, 30s, 40s and up are not alive anymore. And that's important. Also, just to add one more bit of the complicated equation of the context, is that in 1952, we have the agreement with Germany of the shilumim, the compensations. It's not called compensation, I forget the right word.
Yeah,
like reparation. Yeah.
The reparations, which in many ways, the reparation is what enabled most of the Ashkenazi, or the European, let's call it, the European Jews to leave the Ma'abara, because they had some money, they could buy a house, they could buy an apartment, they can open a business. So in many ways, the reparation coming right on top of the Ma'abarot situation really is the kind of the line where the big socioeconomical, educational difference, which exists till this day between European and Mizrahi Jews. It's these two major events that combine together in a very, very, very climatic way.
So let's talk about that.
In a way, the Ma'abarot is very, very popular nowadays, Everyone's now declare, my parents was in the Ma'abarot, but it was not like that. It's only recently people were ashamed that they came from the Ma'abarot. So in a way, it's a renaissance for the Ma'abarot, but it's not. It's too late to be a renaissance.
But so let's go to those questions. Jacob asked one, Janine asked one about the legacy of the Mabarot on the people who were in them until today. So you talked a little bit about the generational shifts, which maybe explains why there's a renaissance of kind of reclaiming that experience. But what, as you both see it, what are the remaining consequences, repercussions, legacy of this for people who were in the Mabarot and for society in general in Israel?
Well, Israel, like most societies, hasn't learned anything. I don't think it's special
anything?
for it. Well, a little bit. I don't think USA learned a lot from Vietnam War, but we'll talk about that in another film. Yes, Israel, I mean, if you would expect Israel as a country, as a society, as an establishment to learn the lesson, I'm afraid to say that this didn't happen. And one of the main things, and Dina can talk about that further, but one of the main things, it's a little bit touches what Itamar asked before, is that one of the very, very, very tough and sad things that happened is that the Ma'abarot turned into slums. They stopped calling them Ma'abarot, but in many ways they became slums which were in many ways even worse than the original Ma'abarot. And if we think of your question, Libby, of what is the inheritance, how it happened generation after generation after generation, there are many analyses and there are many answers, but one of the answers is that these places, Kfar Saba, Itamar is a very specific example, but many of the Ma'abarot, and if you think about later on about the Panterim Ashchorim in the 70s, and you think about Wadi Salib, and you think about many places, they were simply slums with terrible conditions. So that's in one legacy that the Ma'abarot left for I would say in many ways till today.
Mm-hmm. Since you mentioned the Panthers, the Black Panthers, and Arik is talking about the Israeli Black Panthers, which is...
Yeah, I meant the Israeli Black Panthers.
Yeah, of course. There's an example of people coming out of this experience into a progressive and social orientation, but there's a question in the chat, and I think this was hinted at in the questions from Jacob and Janine and some of the others about like, how do we get from the Ma'abarot to a situation where at least the perception is that a lot of the descendants of these people and these people themselves are very right-wing politically.
But you have to, but Dina will answer that. I'll just say Musrara, which is a neighborhood in Jerusalem, which is where the Black Panthers started, used to be a Ma'abara. It started as a Ma'abara. It then became a very, very, very rundown slum. But that's where the Black Panthers started, in the place, basically. Dina, the Musrara was a Ma'abara.
Yeah. Musrara was a Ma'abara, yeah. We have a hero in our film that say, and people hate Mapai. Mapai was the
old left,
the Labor Party, right? And this hate is live until today, and therefore it's unfortunately, I say, that the people that came from the Ma'abarot still carrying this pain and became right-wing because, the Labor Party didn't do anything for them and disrespect them and, and humiliate them and all the bad words that we can say. So, and I think it will take years to do a restart of this situation, that the people that suffer, that came and suffer, will take a new step in their political opinion.
The next Jewish country will be better.
The next generation?
He said the next Jewish country. When we have another Israel, it'll be better than this one. But I think, you're pointing at the embedded hatred of the old left, of the kibbutz movement, the labor movement among people who came through the Mabarot and their descendants. And there's, of course, also the deliberate expansion of that feeling that the right has done, like to keep it going and to keep feeding it. I mean, talk to us a little bit about the former culture minister, Miri Regev, who I'm sure you interacted with as filmmakers in Israel. But tell me a little bit about her in this picture.
Dina, you
I don't want to talk about her.
Yeah, exactly.
In a way, Mabarot, tell the story of these people, and it's the Miri Regev and all her friends uses against the left wing. But I wanted just to tell a private story of my brother. My brother was 8 years old when he came to Israel from Iraq, and he spoke Arabic, right? And in Sha'ar Aliyah, he was taken to a kibbutz because people told my parents in the kibbutz he will get a very, very good education, right? And now I can imagine after I became a mother, I imagine 8 years boy that speaks Arabic are taken to kibbutz Matsuba in the north, and without his parents, and he starts a new life with a family that adopt him. And when I stayed with my parent, and I was jealous because I wanted to be in a kibbutz. But after years, I discovered that this poor boy suffered from many emotional effects because of it. Because to take a boy in this age and to take him to a place with no parents, who can believe doing it? But they thought it will be a very, very good education for him. So this is an example of good idea that made his life, a very, very tragic life in a way. So this is the dissonance of, a new country that made a lot of mistakes. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, my brother is one of the affected of this.
Also, if we go back to our context discussion, Ben-Gurion his fantasy wasn't to bring the Iraqi or the North African Jews to Israel. He was expecting 1 to 2 million Jews coming in from Europe. But
white Jews.
What?
White Jews.
White Jews, of course, European, white, good Jews. But as we know, Hitler kind of ruined his plans and he was stuck. And it's important to understand that the resentment, the deep, deep resentment of, I don't know if we can say all, but many, many of the establishment came from this frustration that these people, that we the establishment, the four founders of Israel brought from Yemen, from Morocco, from Tunisia, from Libya, from Iraq, this is not what we expected. These are not the Jews we expected to build our new Jewish state. And this is this very deep resentment. We found that, we have it in the film, we found that in newspaper articles, in speeches in the, which we have, which we found different meetings to which we have. But this is something which is something which is very inherent in the, you can talk about colonialism or whatever, but it's not something that is just, okay, some Iraqi Jews. No, we had a different Israel in our minds in the 30s and the early 40s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I want to mention another thing, that in a way, the people that came from the Arab countries were the real pioneers of this country, the new country.
So, I see the time, and I want to make sure that we cover some of the other questions that came up. And I guess the big one that I want to bring in now is, why are these stories so undertold? And are they still, like you mentioned, the renaissance of sort of Mizrahi identity and culture, which I think people my age and younger experience in Israel, like that there is a renaissance there. But yeah, talk to us a little bit about the stories themselves being undertold. Is there a change? What's happening in terms of this coming into the light?
I don't know. I see it less politically. I mean, I think it takes time for these kind of traumatic and big phenomenons to come. I mean, Vietnam, the big series came out when? 3 years ago? 4 years ago? It takes time. Things don't happen. And like Dina said, I think this is very important. What Dina said before, maybe she can expand on that. People were ashamed to talk. People were ashamed to talk. And I think it's not, everybody was ashamed to talk. People were ashamed, basically, it's kind of a basic notion. It's a Jewish thing. I think, people are ashamed. Shame and Judaism go together very well. Doesn't matter where you come from. And that's part of it. And it's not only, I don't think it's a matter of a Mizrahi or Sephardic or whatever kind of coming to terms. I think it's a matter of dealing with your own country, with what you did. I mean, it takes, I know, dealing with the Israeli wars, dealing with the 6-day war. I mean, it took 40 years for people to start realizing that this magnificent, amazing war that we finished in 6 days was probably the biggest disaster that ever happened to Israel. So things take time to digest when you talk about historical processes. I don't think this is necessarily has to do with Mizrahi Jews or Ashkenazi Jews, or I think it's deeper than that.
Yeah, I agree with Arik. It takes time. And for me, personally, it took time to declare that I grew up in a Ma'abara, and still I'm not menafnefet, how do you say?
You're not like waving that flag.
I'm not waving with this label, right? And I remember that many years I was very, very ashamed of it. So it takes time. I think the third generation that, create films and, they are very, very loud, and it helps to bring this issue by films, by books, by theater, by the singing, all the singers are Mizrahic now. The popular music is of the people that the singers that came from the Arab countries. So it's now
times are
taking
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's
interesting. Yeah.
It's a hopeful note to end on, just in terms of having some of this represented in the public square. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I'm personally curious about whether this moment of historical reckoning that's really sweeping around the world, including a lot here in the US and in Canada, really questioning, like, what are the monuments? Who are the heroes? Why are we telling these stories and not these stories? I'm wondering if your film, and I know in Israel it's more viewed as a series, like, will have some impact in that arena also in Israel, in creating some of that reckoning of just asking the question, what is the real diversity of experiences that people who live here and are Israeli have had? And I think with that, I am supposed to turn it back to Yitzi to close out this session. So it's been a real honor to be in conversation with the both of you. I hope that people on the call, if you want to continue this kind of thing beyond the remaining days of Other Israel, feel free to sign up for our film club, and we'll be happy to see you there, and look forward to more soon. With that, I will hand it over to my dear friend Yitzi.
Thank you, Libby. A big thank you to Dina and Arik, and of course to the entire NIF crew who have been putting this all together, and big thank you for a wonderful job of moderating from Libby, and all of their support on this festival in general, even beyond this event. I'll just leave you that, and thank you all for participating and being a part of this. I'll just leave you with the thought that tonight, 5 p.m., we have the conversation for the film Objector, as well as the short film Image of Victory, 2 fantastic films. Tomorrow night, One More Jump, and then we have closing night, Laila and Haifa, and the Chag HaChagim after party event. So please join us for that. Stay safe, everyone. We want to see you in person soon. And please tell your friends, help spread the word. There's only 3 more days to see these films. Get them while you can. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.